Imagine walking up to a gas station counter, handing the cashier a crisp $100 bill, and then just watching them instantly throw $70 directly into a roaring fire.
You probably call the police.
Right, you would. Yet, if you drive a combustion engine vehicle, that is essentially what you're doing every single time you fill up your tank.
Yeah, literally every time.
And, it is March 2026.
Mm-hmm.
As I was walking into the studio today, just thinking about that fiery waste of cash, the weight of our work here really hit me.
Oh, how so?
Well, over the years, we have published more than 7,000 deep dives and analyses. 7,000 times we've sat down to unpack the mechanics of the world for you.
It's a lot of deep dives.
It is. And I feel the need to state this with absolute passion right at the top here. If in 2026, after all these years and more than 7,000 deep dives, you are still buying combustion engine cars, it means I haven't been convincing and clear in my analyses.
Yeah.
And I truly hope that's not the case.
Well, the data we're looking at today, it completely validates that passion. I mean, the shift to electric mobility is no longer just a trend.
No, not at all.
Or, some distant environmental goal. It is an absolute, unavoidable macroeconomic reality.
Exactly. And our mission today is to lay out the undeniable multi-layered evidence that the internal combustion engine is functionally obsolete.
Right, because today we aren't just looking at the surface level transition, right? We're digging into the underlying mechanisms of why this is happening.
The why is so important, and how it directly impacts your personal wealth, and really how it's fundamentally rewiring the entire global economy.
Yeah, the scale of it is massive.
It is. So, to do this, we are pulling from a really fascinating stack of sources. I've got my personal field notes tracking European diesel prices and the sheer physics of electric drivetrains.
Always good to have the physics.
Always. We're also diving into a revealing World Bank draft report on electric mobility in developing nations, plus a brand new 2026 paper from Nature Sustainability about the vanishing global fuel tax.
That one's a wild read.
It really is. And finally, a really comprehensive report from the Bank for International Settlements, the BIS, detailing the macroeconomic shockwaves of this energy transition.
Yeah, and that stack lets us zoom all the way in on household budgets, and then pull back to look at international trade balances.
Which is such a crazy contrast.
Right. But when you synthesize personal finance with the global macroeconomic data, the conclusion points aggressively in one direction.
It really does. So let's start right at that personal level. A few days ago, I walked past a station where diesel was hitting €2.10 a liter.
Wow, 210.
Yeah. Our daily expenses are so painfully tethered to whatever, geopolitical crisis is currently rattling the supply chain.
Oh, absolutely.
But looking at that price sign brought me back to the pure physics of what we're actually paying for. It's the leaky bucket concept.
Right, the leaky bucket.
An internal combustion engine is just a massively leaky bucket.
It is. The thermal efficiency numbers are staggering when you lay them out.
They really are.
Like, a standard combustion engine only converts about 30% of the energy stored in that expensive diesel or gasoline into actual kinetic energy.
Just 30%.
Yeah, to actually move the car forward. The remaining 70% is lost entirely as heat, friction, and noise.
So you are paying top dollar to what? Heat up the engine block and wear out your brake pads.
Exactly. You're throwing away 70% of your money. Electric vehicles, though, they operate on a totally different physical paradigm.
Right, because there's no combustion.
Exactly. They convert up to 90% of grid energy into forward motion.
90% versus 30%. It's just wild.
Yeah.
And for anyone listening who thinks, well, sure, the physics are better, but the upfront cost of an EV is too high.
Which is a common concern.
It is. But our notes actually outline a specific strategy to bypass that.
Oh, the used EV hack.
Yeah. It involves buying a 3 to 4-year-old EV that's coming off of VFG.
Right.
And that stands for Valor Future Guarantee, or a Guaranteed Future Value Lease.
Which is a huge financial advantage.
It is. Usually, the dealership or the manufacturer guarantees the car's value at the end of the lease, which means the financial institution absorbs the massive depreciation hit of those first few years.
Right. The driver doesn't absorb it.
Exactly, not the driver.
And the reason that strategy is so incredibly effective right now really relates to the underlying architecture of the drivetrain.
The physics again?
Yeah, the physics. A 3-year-old combustion engine has already endured literally millions of micro explosions.
Just tearing itself apart.
Exactly. But a 3-year-old electric motor, it has essentially just finished its break-in period.
Wow.
So you get to skip the financial depreciation cycle without absorbing a heavy mechanical degradation cycle.
That is such a good way to put it.
And over a 10-year horizon, the total cost of ownership completely diverges. I mean, an EV lacks the hundreds of vibrating heat stress components.
Right. No timing belts to snap.
No oil to change.
No spark plugs to replace.
Yeah, exactly. The maintenance costs just plummet because the physical complexity of the machine is so drastically reduced.
I was looking at the long-term battery replacement fears, too, because that's what everyone always brings up, right?
Oh, yeah. What about the battery?
Exactly. But the data suggests that even if you keep the car for a decade and you actually experience significant battery degradation.
Which takes a long time.
It does. But replacing that battery 10 years from now at future heavily discounted market prices essentially gives you a mechanically new vehicle.
Yeah, it's basically a brand new car.
And when you combine that with charging the car using home solar panels, paid in standard monthly installments.
Or just utilizing ultra-cheap nighttime grid rates.
Yes. The operating costs become a tiny, tiny fraction of fueling those leaky buckets we talked about.
The household economics are just undeniable at this point.
They really are.
But the real structural change, I think, happens when those individual choices start compounding globally.
And that is exactly what I want to explore next. Okay, let's unpack this. If millions of people suddenly start buying imported fuel, that doesn't just lower personal credit card bills.
Oh, it shifts everything.
Right? It has to create a massive disruption on the global stage. What happens when a whole country tries to do this? What happens to a nation when its entire population stops buying foreign oil?
Well, we see what the Bank for International Settlements calls a permanent positive supply shock.
Okay, a permanent positive supply shock.
Yeah. The BIS report highlights this really crucial metric. 80% of the global population lives in countries that are net importers of fossil fuels.
Wait, 80%?
80%. 8 out of 10 people live in nations that just constantly bleed capital.
That is incredible.
They have to export their own wealth just to keep their domestic economies running.
So places like India, South Korea, Thailand, Vietnam,
Yeah.
they are draining their national wealth every single day just to fuel their transportation networks.
Which brings us to the concept of current accounts.
The macro stuff.
Exactly. In macroeconomics, a current account basically measures a country's trade balance. Are they exporting more value than they are importing? For these massive fossil fuel importers, their current accounts are heavily, heavily weighed down by this constant need to buy oil.
Because they just have to have it.
Right. But as ED adoption scales in those regions, the billions of dollars that used to leave the country, it just stays domestic.
It just stays there.
Yeah. It permanently rewires their current accounts, which frees up massive amounts of capital for local investment.
It reminds me of the telecom leapfrog.
Oh, yeah, that's a great analogy.
It's like developing nations skipping landline telephones and going straight to smartphones, but with transportation. They bypassed laying millions of miles of copper wire back in the day, and now we're seeing developing economies leapfrog the combustion infrastructure entirely.
They're moving directly to electric mobility. And the World Bank draft report on low and middle income countries, or LMICs, it provides incredible case studies on this leapfrog effect.
Yeah, because the narrative in wealthy nations is usually so focused on, luxury electric sedans.
Right, the latest Tesla or whatever.
Yeah.
But in LMICs, the revolution is largely commercial and public.
Public transit.
Yes. Municipalities in Brazil, Chile, India, they are electrifying vast fleets of urban buses.
And a bus runs continuously.
Exactly, meaning that 90% efficiency advantage we discussed earlier, it translates into massive municipal savings very, very quickly.
I was especially fascinated by the battery swapping models that the World Bank detailed for East Africa and Asia.
Oh, the decoupling model.
Yes, because the upfront cost of an EV battery is usually the biggest hurdle in those markets, right?
That's a huge barrier to entry.
But these companies have figured out how to decouple the battery from the vehicle entirely. They sell an electric 2- or 3-wheeler essentially as an empty shell.
Which makes it incredibly cheap to buy.
Exactly. Then the driver simply subscribes to a battery network.
And the mechanics of that model are brilliant for both the provider and the consumer.
It really is a win-win.
Because when a driver runs low on charge, they just pull up to a kiosk, swap their depleted battery for a fully charged one, and it takes less than a minute.
And they never have to worry about battery degradation.
Right, but they don't even own the battery.
That's so smart.
And for the network provider, they can charge all these batteries slowly during off-peak hours
when
grid electricity is cheapest.
maximizing their profit margins?
Exactly.
Hmm.
The World Bank modeling suggests that aiming for 30% of new passenger vehicles to be electric by 2030. It isn't just an environmental aspiration for these developing nations.
No, it's a profound economic catalyst.
It makes total economic sense.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Because that massive influx of capital staying inside India, Brazil, and Vietnam, it has to create an equal and opposite reaction on the other side of the globe.
It does.
If 80% of the world is suddenly keeping their money instead of buying imported oil, what happens to the countries whose entire survival depends on selling that 30% efficiency, leaky bucket fuel?
Yeah, the BIS data paints a very stark picture for undiversified fossil fuel exporters.
We're talking about countries like Saudi Arabia, Algeria, Kuwait.
Right. As global oil demand enters a structural decline, these nations face collapsing current accounts.
Collapsing.
The revenue that funds their governments, their social safety nets, their infrastructure, it will aggressively shrink.
Because the demand just isn't there anymore.
Exactly. They are facing a ticking clock to invent entirely new economic models. And historically, transitioning an entire national economy away from its single primary export is immensely difficult.
And hugely disruptive. But I have to push back a bit on the geopolitical angle here.
Sure, go ahead.
Are we just trading one cartel for another? I mean, replacing OPEC with whoever controls lithium and copper. Are we really solving the dependency problem, or are we just trading oil barons for mineral barons?
It's a very valid concern. But the physics of the resources dictate a completely different economic reality.
I guess.
Well, fossil fuels require a perpetual cycle, right? Extraction, transportation, combustion, and then repurchase. You burn it, it's gone, you have to buy more.
Right. You're always on the hook.
But minerals, like copper from Peru and Chile, or lithium from Australia and Bolivia, they are front-loaded assets.
Because you only need to extract them once to build the battery.
Precisely. You mine the lithium once, you manufacture the battery, and the driver uses it for a decade or longer.
And then?
Once the vehicle reaches the end of its life, the battery is recycled to recover the vast majority of those minerals to build the next generation of batteries.
So you don't burn the lithium?
No, you don't burn it. So yes, the transition will absolutely trigger a massive temporary supercycle boom for these mineral-rich nations.
As the world builds out the initial fleet of EVs.
Right, and the grid storage. However, it does not create the permanent, century-long dependency loop that oil does. It's a completely different macroeconomic paradigm.
Though, looking at the sources, they make it very clear that the bottleneck isn't just pulling the rocks out of the ground.
No, it's the refining.
Right. China holds a massive dominant position in the refining capacity for these minerals. Even if the raw lithium is mined in Australia, it almost certainly has to be shipped to China to be processed into battery-grade material.
Yeah.
That is a massive geopolitical lever.
Oh, without a doubt. China's dominance in the refining supply chain is the primary bottleneck of the transition right now. It's a key geopolitical factor.
For sure.
But again, the front-loaded nature of batteries changes the leverage.
How does that work?
Well, think about it. If a geopolitical conflict disrupts oil supply, gas stations run dry in a week and the economy halts.
Total panic.
Right. But if a conflict disrupts lithium refining, it disrupts the manufacturing of new cars next year.
Oh, I see.
The millions of EVs already on the road, sitting in driveways with their batteries fully intact, they just keep driving.
Right. No one can shut off your daily commute by closing a pipeline.
Exactly.
So the oil producers lose, the mineral miners and refiners get a massive front-loaded boom, and the everyday driver saves a fortune. It sounds like an overwhelming net positive.
It largely is.
But as I was reading through that 2026 Nature Sustainability paper, there is a massive hidden trap buried in the data.
Ah, the tax trap.
And it could literally slam the brakes on this whole thing. It all comes down to a $900 billion gap.
It really is the great paradox of the energy transition.
It's shocking. In 2023, governments around the world collected over $900 billion in fuel taxes.
That's billion with a B.
Yes, $900 billion. That is money levied directly at the gas pump. As people switch to electric vehicles and start charging at home or at public kiosks, that $900 billion of government revenue simply vanishes.
Oh, gone.
And the paper reveals this terrifying double exposure specifically for the developing world.
Yeah, because when you look at high-income nations, fuel taxes generally make up about 2 to 4% of total government revenue.
Which is bad. but manageable.
Right, it's a fiscal hole,
Yeah.
but a wealthy economy can absorb it or adapt. However, in low and middle-income countries, fuel taxes can account for over 9% of total government revenue.
9%.
The reliance is heavily, heavily skewed.
So why is the developing world so disproportionately reliant on taxing fuel?
It comes down to institutional infrastructure. If a government wants to collect income tax, it needs a robust, formalized banking system.
Payroll tracking, that sort of thing?
Exactly, and citizens actually working in the formal economy. In many developing nations, a massive percentage of the population operates in the informal, cash-based economy.
Right.
Tracking and taxing that is nearly impossible for a government with weak administrative capacity.
Oh, I see.
But taxing a physical imported commodity,
It's easy.
incredibly easy. A massive fuel tanker pulls into a port or a refinery, and the government just taxes it right at the source. It is the easiest, most reliable way to fund road paving, school construction, basic public services.
Which creates this agonizing, tragic irony.
It really does.
Many of these low-income nations are already navigating severe debt crises. They completely lack the technological and administrative infrastructure to quickly roll out new advanced taxes.
Like highly technical, GPS-based distance road pricing. They just don't have it.
Right. They can't just flip a switch to replace the lost fuel tax.
And the resulting fiscal panic is the trap. As incredibly cheap, hyper-efficient Chinese EVs flood into Latin America, Africa, Southeast Asia.
Which, again, is phenomenal for local drivers and the global climate.
Yes, it's great for them.
Yeah.
But these governments are watching their primary revenue stream evaporate.
Oh, man.
So to avoid defaulting on their debts and just completely defunding their societies, they might be forced to slap massive import tariffs or punitive registration fees on electric vehicles.
So they don't hate EVs, they're just desperate to keep the lights on.
Exactly.
And by doing that, they might accidentally slow down the very climate transition they desperately need, purely out of administrative survival.
Yes.
It is such a complicated, interconnected web. I mean, your personal decision to stop driving a leaky bucket saves you thousands of dollars.
Right.
But that individual choice, multiplied by hundreds of millions globally, it forces governments worldwide to completely rethink how society is funded.
It changes everything.
We've covered so much ground today, from the pure thermal inefficiency of an engine block all the way to the restructuring of global trade balances. How do we synthesize all these moving parts?
Well, looking across the entire stack of sources, the World Bank models, the BIS economic data, the tax research, the broader picture is clear. We face profound macroeconomic hurdles.
Clearly, vanished taxes, shifting global power.
Exactly. Governments have to completely engineer new tax infrastructures. Global power dynamics are shifting from the oil fields of the Middle East to the mines of South America and the refining hubs of China.
It's a messy transition.
It is. But the ultimate destination of this transition, cleaner air, vastly cheaper personal transport, and a permanently more efficient global energy system, it is profoundly positive.
It really is.
And mathematically, historically, it is inevitable.
I think that inevitability is what makes this so fascinating.
Yeah. And, it leaves us with a final puzzle to mull over.
Okay, let's hear it.
We spent time earlier unpacking the mechanical simplicity and durability of electric drivetrains.
Right. No micro-explosion.
Right. So if EV batteries are now routinely lasting well over a decade, and the chassis in the electric motors can easily run for hundreds of thousands of miles.
Okay.
If we are truly entering an era of multi-million mile vehicle lifespans, what happens to the traditional auto industry?
Oh, wow.
Right now, their entire financial empire, their whole business model, relies on consumers feeling the need to buy a brand new vehicle every 5 to 7 years.
Because the old one starts breaking down.
Exactly. But if your EV works perfectly for 20 years, does the traditional auto industry business model completely collapse by the 2030s?
Selling a product that never breaks is a really tough way to maintain quarterly growth.
It sure is.
That is an incredible thought, something for everyone to explore on their own. But I want to bring this all the way back to where we started today. To you, listening right now, please look at the math. Look at the shifting global trade balances, the leapfrog effect we talked about, and just the basic physics of the machines. Do not buy a combustion car. Respect your wallet, respect the future, and stop throwing 70% of your money away as heat.
Yeah, let the leaky bucket go.
Exactly. And before we go, I also just want to take a moment to express some deep gratitude. You have stuck with us over the years through more than 7,000 of these deep dives.
It's been an amazing journey.
It really has. We have explored the changing mechanics of the world together. We've learned together, and it is an absolute privilege to have you with us on this journey. So thank you, and until next time, don't fuel those leaky buckets.